Violence against women is one of the most relevant issues in the world and a flagrant violation of human rights. While there have been significant advances in response to this problematic, it still poses a threat over the safety, health, political and economic autonomy of women, teenagers, and girls. Latin America is currently considered as one of the regions with the highest rate of violence against women, teenagers, and girls, having the most feminicides on a worldwide level. For many of the countries in this region, there has been a disconnect between the laws that they are subscribed to in order to protect women's rights and the actual implementation of these policies. Similarly, budgetary resources have not always been properly directed at developing initiatives that could address gender violence, ensuring the integrity of women. Additionally, it is important to point out that gender violence continues to permeate everyday lives due to its lack of visibility and overall normalization, which has been established through several patriarchal cultural patterns that date back too far and remain present up until this day. This has led to an uprising of actions and initiatives led by women that intend to countercount the gender-related violence experienced in these countries. One of the most relevant actions that have arisen in the past years is Un Violador en Tu Camino, a Chilean chant that initially started out as part of a theater play created by the feminist collective Las Thesis. The chant denounces the institutionalized violence against women that is established in the country. It arrived to the streets of Valparaíso on November 20th in 2019 during a series of protests, and it has been replicated in other countries, adapting to the situations of violence that women must endure in them. As an Ecuadorian woman, I have been able to witness what the situations of gender violence are like in the region. This investigation centers on the gender-related violence that women experience in Mexico, which is one of the Latin American countries where this type of violence prevails the most. It also focuses on the actions that have arisen to countercount it, as well as the way in which the overall problematic and these initiatives are presented on mainstream media. In order to do so, I developed an initial theoretical framework based on the work of various theorists and researchers, using the investigation of Dr. Laura Campos as one of the center points. Then, I carried out a research process composed by two main elements: a content analysis and interviews. For the content analysis, I used material from Televisa and TV Azteca, two of the most significant television producers in Mexico. I analyzed their new shows, Despierta and Hechos, focusing on two main dates: November 25th in 2019, on the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, and March 8th in 2020, on the International Women's Day. In order to get a holistic vision of how gender-related problematics were presented, as well as the impact that the female-led actions had on those dates, 4 other broadcasts were analyzed for each of the shows. The content analysis allowed to code images and videos and examine trends and patterns within them. This led to the development of an analytic framework that provided flexibility in the research process. This framework was composed by three main stages: an exploratory stage, a quantitative analysis, and a qualitative analysis. The last stage was the most relevant one, as it allowed to interpret the information based on the constant comparison among the verbatims, tone of voice, and body language, as well as the knowledge obtained from other research aspects that took place either previously or in parallel. It is important to highlight that the images and clips were key elements at this stage, as they were able to provide a visual way to depict the relationship between the verbatims, tone of voice, and body language, allowing to capture and evaluate the behaviors that are expressed through the movement. In order to get a new point of view, I carried out an interview with Las Brujas del Mar, a feminist collective based in Veracruz that aims to make the gender balance in the country visible by socializing the announces on several networks. They were also the ones to propose the Paro Nacional that took place on March 9th this year, encouraging women to stop their daily activities to make their absence visible. I also interviewed X, Justicia para las Mujeres, a feminist organization based in Mexico City that intends to transform the institutions, laws, and politics to facilitate the access to the justice system for Mexican women. Finally, I interviewed Artemisas por la Equidad, a feminist social association based in Nuevo León that aims to register gender violence-related cases in order to support the creation of laws and initiatives that protect women's rights. Similar to the content analysis, I created an online database to analyze the interviews based on different factors. Additionally, it is important to highlight that there was an operating distance between the interviews. While I had preconceptions about this problematic due to my cultural baggage, I was also able to set them apart and listen to their concepts and experiences, adding more value to the overall research. Violence against women in Mexico has been widely considered as an issue that almost always takes place within the private sphere, which refers to situations of violence that are experienced in familiar spaces by family members or partners, as well as other situations of violence that remain unseen due to the lack of visibility that would allow them to transition to the public sphere. This idea was presented on the news broadcast of Despierta that took place on November 25th, highlighting that most cases in the country are committed by the woman's sentimental partners, family members, or acquaintances. However, going back to that notion and establishing the family as both the cause and solution of the violence against women can be unfavorable when addressing the problematic. Additionally, there has been a notable diversification of the problematic due to an increase in cases of violence in public spaces, which also needs to be accounted for by the actors that can influence how this problematic is handled. The media has a key role within this problematic, since they're one of the main actors to attribute meaning to these situations of violence through the images that they present. Women, whose bodies have been considered to bear a distinct sociality, have been repeatedly presented as icons to serve as pleasure and enjoyment for those who actively control the look. Therefore, it is important to highlight that even when these problematics undergo processes of mediation and mediatization and are able to potentially transition from one sphere to another, they are not necessarily legitimized and validated, but rather presented as a spectacle. All three interviewees gave their input about the role that media plays in this problematic. Ochoa, from Artemisas por la Equidad, highlighted how she has always worked closely with the media, writing articles and letters, as well as doing interviews. She has expressed how the visibility that they provide is important, which is why she continues to collaborate with them. Unda, from Las Brujas del Mar, and Hubert, from X Justicia para las Mujeres, concurred that there has been a positive evolution in terms of how the media approaches this problematic, given that some media are starting to receive gender perspective courses and access transparency documentation. However, they also pointed out that there is still a persisting need for the media to develop a higher understanding of this problematic, as well as the way to approach it in order to create a window for potential change. This relates to the search of actions and initiatives that have arisen from victims and other actors within alternative spaces or peripheral spheres. These alternative actions and initiatives have taken different forms and approaches. There have been several protests, workshops, and other space created to encourage dialogue as well as provide a safe environment for women that have experienced situations of violence. The protests that took place on March 8th and the Paro Nacional on March 9th have been two of the most impactful alternatives for the visibilization of this problematic during this year. Unda commented that one of the victories of the Paro Nacional was the increase of interest in the problematic and its origins. The Hechos News broadcast on March 9th also allowed to highlight the necessity to take into account the diversity among women as well as their needs when addressing the problematic. Following this research, it was possible to create Echoes, an observational device developed in VR that at its core aims to create new and diverse spheres by using the research results as a departing point. It intends to provide a sensitive environment that presents 17 sub-problematics regarding the situations of violence experienced by women and the actions and initiatives developed to countercount them, creating an overlap that could potentially lead to spaces that promote dialogue and different approaches for all actors involved to have an active participation and address the problematic in a holistic manner. Given that while women are the ones experiencing these situations of violence, everyone could play a role in it. The context that we're currently experiencing due to the COVID-19 pandemic has led to a severe increase in situations of violence experienced by women in Mexico. The mandatory quarantine has forced women to spend more time with their aggressors, which has also led to these situations of violence to lose visibility by bringing them back to the private sphere. This context has also allowed to evidence that there is not a single solution to this problematic, but rather there is a necessity to explore new alternatives and approaches that allow to protect women, ensure their rights, respect their diverse backgrounds and needs, and raise awareness about a problematic that continues to grow and evolve. Thank you.